Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Chasing Callie by Heather Mackinnon, narrated by Thom and Cassandra Myles. Chapter 1. Wyatt. You ready for this? My twin brother sighed beside me. I guess so. What's this, number 5? 6, actually. Nice. Lucky number 6. I frowned in his direction. Never heard that one before. I thought 7 was supposed to be the lucky number. Wes shook his head, his dirty blonde hair settling in an even bigger mess than before. Let's hope for our sake that 6 is our lucky number. Mom can't go without seeing a doctor for much longer. I sobered at the reminder of our poor mom. She was sitting in a cheap motel not far from here. She'd been battling lupus for as long as I could remember, and lately it seemed like the disease was winning more battles than she was. Have you seen how bad her rash has gotten? I asked softly. Wes sighed, his shaggy head dipping lower. Yeah, and we almost couldn't get her fever down last night. Something needs to change quickly. He didn't say it, but the or else was implied. We'd been searching for a new pack for over a month, and had done nothing but strike out over and over. Every pack in Tennessee had already turned us down, and that's what brought us here to Asheville, North Carolina. We'd heard good things about Abraham McCoy's pack, and were hoping they were true. In our old pack, we'd worked for the Alpha as enforcers, and obviously that job didn't come with health insurance. They'd had a doctor on the pack payroll, but he'd never done much for our mom. His lack of care was one of the reasons we were finally driven from the place we'd called home our whole lives. As I looked out my windshield at the massive lodge in front of us, I could only hope that Abraham was different, that this might be the place where things would turn around for us, that maybe we'd finally find a home where we all belonged. Although the likelihood of finding anywhere our mom belonged was slim. I released a deep breath and unbuckled my seatbelt. I guess we might as well get this over with. That's the spirit. I shot Wes a withering glare. Try to keep your smart-ass comments to yourself in there, okay? We don't need to get turned away because of your big mouth. Wes grinned. If anything, we'll get accepted for my sparkling personality. I rolled my eyes as I climbed out of my Jeep and looked again at the massive house in front of me. It was typical for Alphas to have giant homes, so this was nothing new. I'd found it was usually a way for them to seem greater and more important than they actually were. Hopefully that wasn't the case with Abraham. But even if it was, I'd gladly accept an inflated ego if it meant we got some help for Mom. Wes and I silently approached the wraparound patio and large front door. On the edge of my peripheral, I spotted the reflective eyes of multiple wolves in between the trees, but I ignored them. They were doing their job by protecting the packlands. I'd been there and done that. I stepped up first, and after taking a fortifying breath, rapped my knuckles on the heavy red cedar. We only waited a few moments before we heard the sound of someone approaching, and the door was pulled open to reveal a short brunette. Her light brown eyes perused both of us slowly before her lips tilted into a grin. How can I help you, fine gentlemen? I cleared my throat. We have an appointment with Abraham. She nodded slowly. Yeah, Abraham mentioned he had some wolves dropping by. You two interviewing to join the pack? Yeah, we are. Her eyes raked me up and down as her smile got wider. Well, isn't this my lucky day? Come on in. She opened the door wider and stepped aside as we entered. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. Grand, but somehow homey at the same time. I was used to the inside of Alpha's houses being extravagant and flashy, but this one wasn't. I wondered what that said about the man who owned it. Come on, I'll bring you two upstairs. I'm Aubrey, by the way. She waved for us to follow, and we fell in line behind her. The heavy sway of her hips seemed exaggerated, but I had more important things to concentrate on. We passed through the giant entryway and down a long hall before coming to a staircase that was next to a massive kitchen. I couldn't help but take a peek and was immediately surprised by the setup. Instead of one stately dining table like I was used to, there were several tables taking up half the space. It looked more like a cafeteria than the ornate kitchen I was expecting. One of the tables had a group of beefy men I assumed were enforcers, playing a game of cards. Another had a couple of women picking at plates full of food in between talking and laughing. The last occupied table had one lone woman at it, and for some reason, she interested me most. Her slender shoulders were hunched over a book, her nose almost literally stuck in it. Her wild chestnut curls framed a pale face, but that was about all I could see from where I was. I stood there watching her for a long minute, trying to figure out why, out of every person in that room, she caught and held my attention. With a shake of my head, I turned to find Aubrey and my brother halfway up the first set of stairs and jogged to catch up with them. On the way up the next flight, a set of large men passed us by with a wave and a smile for Aubrey. I hurried to catch up to her, curious about what I'd seen so far. "How many people live here?" Aubrey turned to me with a smile. "Currently about 15. My eyes widened at the number. 15? Why? Aubrey shrugged. "Most of Abraham's enforcers live here, and then of course there's him and his family." "He lives with all his enforcers?" "I guess that would explain the surplus of tables in the kitchen. If you had to feed 15 werewolves every day, you definitely needed the space, especially if most of them were enforcers." "Yeah, that's the way he likes it. They have the option of living in one of the pack houses if they want, but most are single and prefer to live in the lodge. Personally, I think it's because they don't have to worry about things like housekeeping and cooking if they live here, but they'll never admit that." "So Abraham houses, feeds, and takes care of all his enforcers here?" The more she spoke, the more unbelievable I found what she was saying. "Yep," she said, popping the last letter of the word. "He's a pretty decent alpha. You guys will like it here." I already kind of did. Now we just had to hope we didn't screw it up. Once we reached the 3rd floor, Aubrey walked us down a short hallway and knocked on one of the doors. We heard a gruff male voice call for us to come in, and she opened the door. "This is where I leave you, but feel free to come find me later," she said with a wink, before spinning around and strutting off. I shook my head, the ghost of a smile on my face. I wondered if everyone else was going to be as friendly as Aubrey. My brother shot me a smirk, and I knew he was thinking the same thing. We turned together and walked into what looked like an office, and came face to face with the alpha. Abraham was tall, as expected, with the broad shoulders and heavy build you'd expect from a man who could attain and then retain a position like alpha. What was unexpected was the wide smile across his face. What was even more surprising was when he walked around his desk to greet us. "You must be Wyatt and Wesley Carter. I'm Abraham McCoy. It's nice to meet you two. I hope you found the place all right." He held out a hand for each of us to shake, and we did, although hesitantly. Truthfully, I wasn't used to alphas being this friendly, at least not to strange wolves that showed up on their doorstep asking for a place in their pack. I cleared my throat and finally found my tongue. "Hi, yes, I'm Wyatt, and this is my brother Wes. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to meet with us." Abraham waved my thanks away. "It's my pleasure. Why don't you two come in and have a seat and we can talk some?" Surprising me yet again, instead of inviting us to sit in front of his desk, he gestured toward a leather couch off to one side. He took a chair opposite the sofa and crossed one jeaned leg over the other as he waited for us to take our seats. Whenever we'd met with alphas in the past, they'd always had us sit in front of their giant ornate desks while they reclined in expensive-looking office chairs. It served to make us uncomfortable, and worked every time. Abraham, though, seemed to want to speak in a more relaxed atmosphere, and that put me at ease right away. When Wes and I were seated, Abraham smiled at us again. "So, you two are coming all the way from Tennessee, is that right?" "Yes, Alpha," Wes answered. Abraham frowned and shook his head. "Call me Abraham." Wes shot me a quizzical look before nodding. "Okay then, Abraham." The alpha smiled and leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about yourselves." I looked at Wes briefly before speaking up. "We're just two pretty average guys who are looking for a new pack. We were enforcers in our old one, and would be interested in doing that here too. We can always use more enforcers." He rubbed at the stubble on his chin. "Tell me what brings you to North Carolina." I met Wes's eyes quickly again and saw the resignation there that I felt. This was a question we always dreaded answering. The more packs we interviewed with and got turned down by, the worse it looked to the next alpha. I didn't want to admit that he was our sixth choice, but knew lying would probably be worse. Alphas communicated frequently, and Abraham probably knew the answer to this question already. We, weren't having any luck joining a pack in Tennessee, so we thought we'd try across the border. Abraham nodded slowly, his shrewd eyes assessing both of us equally. Why did you leave your old pack? I took a deep breath and opened my mouth to answer when there was a knock on the door. Abraham glanced away before focusing on me once more. Come in, Beam. The office door opened, and in walked a tall, beautiful woman with icy blue eyes and short, straight dark hair. She gave us each nods before walking over to stand beside Abraham. He nodded at the woman and said, This is my sister, Beatrice. She's the beta of our pack. Wes leaned forward. You're the beta? I winced at his tone, and my hand itched to slap the back of his dumbass head. Beatrice smiled, but it was frosty. Yep. Abraham laughed. Trust me, Wes. She beat every other enforcer in the pack for this position. Wes chuckled. I need to see that. Beatrice's smile widened until you could see most of her teeth. I'd love to give you a demonstration sometime. My idiot brother clapped his hands and rubbed them together. Hell yeah. I shook my head, hoping he'd keep the stupid comments to himself for a minute. Abraham focused on me again. So, you were just about to tell me what caused you to leave your old pack. I did my best to hold his blue gaze while I tried to find a way to explain our circumstances without giving away the real reason we had to leave. Finally, I decided to just tell the whole truth. He'd find out eventually anyway, so what was the point in prolonging the inevitable? Besides, if we were really looking for a place to belong, that meant we all needed to belong here, not just me and Wes. I took a deep breath. Our old alpha wasn't too fond of our mother living on pack lands. When our father was alive, he'd been able to hold them off, but when we lost him, things started to go downhill. Some of the other wolves were becoming unhappy with her living there with us. We left before things could get too bad. Abraham's expression didn't change as he watched me. And why did your old alpha have a problem with your mother? I glanced at Wes, who just shrugged. Turning back to Abraham, I simply said, Because she's human. When the look on his face still didn't shift from the deeply contemplative one he'd been wearing for the past couple of minutes, I glanced at Beatrice. She too didn't look surprised. Finally, Abraham spoke up. Is that all? I rocked backward at his question. Is that all? That was enough to get us ostracized from our last pack and given a firm no from another 5. And yet this guy wasn't even batting an eye. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Abraham's eyes narrowed. Sounds like there's more to the story. I want to hear it all. Well, our mom is sick, and the doctor at our old pack wasn't treating her anymore. She was getting sicker and sicker, and we needed to do something before we lost her, too. It was either leave and find a place that would help us help her, or watch her die slowly from her disease. I'm sure you can understand we really only had one choice there. Abraham's expression softened. What's wrong with her? I swallowed once. Lupus. He nodded before glancing at his sister. She wore a similarly sympathetic expression, and my heart raced in my chest. I'll be honest with you two, Abraham began. I'd already reached out to your old pack and learned most of this for myself. Of course, your old alpha put a certain spin on the events, as you can imagine, but I'm not too surprised about that. He'd also mentioned that your mom was human, but her being sick was never brought up. He uncrossed his legs and leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. I want to apologize for the treatment your mother has received in the past, and assure you that won't be the case here. My heart soared in my chest, thumping loud enough that I was positive everyone in the room could hear it. I could feel how close we were to having a new place to live, and I held my breath as I waited for him to continue. Is your mom here with you today? I shook my head. No, she's back at the motel. I'd like to meet her. Could you bring her by tomorrow? I turned to my brother with a frown and found a similar expression on his face. You want to meet our mom? Of course. I like to get to know all the members of my pack. The corners of my lips turned up without my permission. No one had ever called Mom Pack before. Does that mean we're members of your pack now? Abraham glanced at Beatrice again, who just shrugged. I don't see why not. There will be a probationary period of 30 days, of course, but barring any unforeseen issues, we'd be honored to have you join the Asheville pack. The air gusted out of my lungs as my shoulders slumped, and I felt Wes do the same next to me. Finally, after all this time, it looked like we were going to have a safe place to live. A safe place for our mom. Things were looking up for the first time since we'd lost our dad. Chapter 2. Wyatt. So when can you all move in? My mouth fell open at Abraham's abrupt question. I turned to look at my brother and found a similar expression on his face. Truthfully, I was still shocked we'd gotten this far. That an alpha had actually accepted us into his pack knowing what our mother was. It was a lot to take in such a short amount of time. Tomorrow? Wes finally said. Sounds good. I'm assuming you two would prefer to live in a pack house with your mother rather than here in the lodge. I swallowed, still not believing he was speaking about our mom in such a nonchalant way. Our whole lives she'd been this dirty secret. Someone that was whispered about. Someone that was treated with revulsion and contempt by our whole pack. At one point when I was younger and much stupider, I'd even started hating her myself, although I wasn't sure if it was really her I hated or what she was. I just wanted to be a normal werewolf with normal werewolf problems. Not a half-breed who had to fight twice as hard as everyone else for the acceptance that came so easily for them. Every day was a struggle, but it wasn't until I was older that I stopped to think about how hard it must have been for her. She practically lived in isolation our whole lives. Her only escape had been when she'd leave pack lands to work as a nurse at the local hospital. But as soon as her shift was over, she came straight home and basically hid inside our house. She didn't have friends. She didn't talk to the other pack members. All she had was our dad and us. It wasn't fair that she'd had to live like that, but there hadn't really been another option. With us and our dad being werewolves, we needed to live somewhere we would be safe and able to shift when we needed to. Unfortunately, that meant she was forced to live as an outsider in a place that wasn't ever truly safe for her. And she did all that because of how deeply she loved my dad and us. When I'd finally grown up enough to pull my head out of my ass, I'd realized the kind of sacrifices she'd made for us, and did my best to make her life as easy as possible. I finally understood how much we owed her, and swore to repay it any way I could. I still felt that debt weighing me down to this day. Wyatt? I shook my head and looked into the alpha's blue eyes. I'm sorry, what? I was just asking if you all would be more comfortable living in a pack house. Oh, yeah. That would probably be safest for her. Abraham frowned and shot a glance at his sister, who looked equally troubled. You won't have those kinds of issues here. This pack is full of wolves who had trouble finding a place to belong. No one's going to give you trouble over your mother being human. His words sounded good, but having lived all my life seeing the way wolves treated humans, I'd believe it when I saw it. But all I said was, that'll be a nice change. I could tell he didn't believe me when he narrowed his eyes, but thankfully he dropped it. I'll have a pack house cleaned up for you today. It'll be ready for you by tomorrow morning. The vice that felt like it was permanently squeezing my chest loosened the smallest bit. This was really happening. And I'll have Doc Monroe stop by your new place tomorrow once you're settled and take a look at your mom. That vice loosened even more. You have a doctor on pack lands? Abraham had an easy smile on his face. We do. He's a great guy. I know he'll be more than happy to take care of your mom. My shoulders dropped as the weight that had settled on them finally fell off, a weight I'd felt bearing down on me ever since our dad died. It had always been his job to take care of Mom, but with him gone, that role fell to us. Honestly, it felt like we'd been doing a shitty job of it up until now. Abraham turned to Beatrice again. Can you have Aubrey go work on House 3 for them? She nodded and left the office. When she was gone, Abraham turned to us and clapped his hands. Do you two have any questions for me? My brother and I looked at each other before he spoke up. What about us joining the enforcers? Oh, yes. We can have Bee evaluate the two of you sometime this week. If she's satisfied with your abilities, you'll be more than welcome to join. What does the position entail? I asked. From what I'd heard, every alpha had different expectations for their enforcers, and I wanted to know what we were getting into before accepting a position like this. Well, obviously your main job is to protect the pack. That means you'll be put on a rotating shift running patrols with the other enforcers. You'll also be expected to join weekly trainings to keep you at peak physical performance. Those are run by B and occasionally me. Usually my enforcers live and eat here, but since you'll be in a pack house, things will be a bit different. You'll still be welcome to take your meals here as often as you like, and have full access to any of the amenities the lodge has to offer. In addition to food and lodging, you'll also receive a stipend for your services. My jaw basically hit my lap. Abraham went on to state a figure for our salaries, and my mouth continued to hang open. It was more than twice what we'd been paid at our old pack. This place was starting to seem too good to be true. How about I give you two a tour now? Wes and I stood when Abraham did. That sounds great. He led us to his office door and waved us out ahead of him. This is my wing. You can usually find me in my office, but I'll also give you both my cell number just in case you need me and can't find me. He went on to explain that his sister's rooms were down the other hallway on that floor before leading us to the staircase. Most of the enforcers live on the second floor, but a few have rooms on the ground level. He continued as we walked. When we reached the first floor, he turned down a hall and opened a door to another set of stairs leading into the basement. Down there is a game room, a movie room, and some basic lounge areas. Feel free to use any of them anytime you like. He closed the door and turned to head back the way we came. We followed him, and if I knew my brother, he was as lost in thought as I was. Never had I imagined an alpha opening his home to his pack like this. It was unheard of. We'll see who's around that I can introduce you to, Abraham called over his shoulder as he headed toward the kitchen. When we got there, the two chatting women were gone, but the card players were still at it, as well as the lone woman with a thick book in front of her. Abraham stepped up to the beefy-looking werewolves first. Huxley, Matthias, Calvin, Clyde, he said as he pointed to each man. This here is Wyatt and Wes. They're the newest members of our pack. They all extended their hands one by one for us to shake. Their expressions were a little wary, but that was to be expected. Their job was to protect this pack, and they weren't sure they could trust us yet. I knew we'd eventually prove they could. These two are hoping to become enforcers as well. They'll be evaluated by B sometime this week. Huxley snorted as he looked down at the cards in his hand. Good luck with that. She's vicious. Matthias chuckled and shook his head. She can't be that bad. Wes spoke up from beside me. Huxley looked up at him. You have no idea. My idiot brother, instead of being properly cowed, stood a little taller. I knew he was itching for the challenge, and I could only hope that Beatrice knocked him on his ass. He could use being taken down a peg or two. Abraham turned around to scan the rest of the kitchen before his eyes widened slightly. Can't believe Callie's out of her back cave, he murmured, before gesturing toward the woman sitting at a table all alone. Come meet one of my sisters, he said to us. How many do you have? Wes said as we followed Abraham across the room. He chuckled. Too many. There are 5 of us. My eyes widened as we followed Abraham. Werewolves were always born as twins or even triplets, but 5 at once? Damn. We reached the curly-haired woman, but she ignored us. How she could be oblivious to 3 giant werewolves surrounding her was a mystery, but she was somehow doing it. Abraham leaned over and tapped her on the shoulder. She jerked in response before glancing up at him, and I got my first good look at her. Her pale skin was flawless in a way that almost looked unnatural. The only thing marring her face was a small birthmark to the right of her pink lips. Her eyes were a pale blue, and I could see the resemblance to Abraham and Beatrice in them. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to introduce you to our new packmates. He turned to us. Wyatt, Wes, This is my sister Callista. Even though my eyes hadn't left her once, when her pale blue gaze met mine, I was completely unprepared. Everything came to a screeching halt as the whole damn world stopped spinning. My heart thumped irregularly in my chest, and my sweaty hands clenched into fists as her eyes widened slightly. In that instant, I knew she was feeling the same thing I was, that something was happening between us. We were on the cusp of something critical and life-altering, and just when I thought my heart was going to beat through my ribcage, she broke eye contact. I took a deep breath, like I'd spent hours oxygen-deprived. Keeping my panting as discreet as I could, I raked my eyes over every available inch of her. It felt like I could stand there and watch her for hours. When she finally spoke, it was like another shock to my system. "Nice to meet you both." Her voice was soft and quiet, but strong enough to cross the distance between us. It was like cotton candy wrapped around steel, light and fluffy on the outside, but with a strength and resilience underneath. "You too," Wes said from beside me. When I was still silent a minute later, my brother elbowed me in the ribs and I staggered forward. "Right. Nice to meet you too," I choked out. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I knew it all stemmed from the woman sitting in front of me, the one who was still staring at the table before her like it was the most interesting thing in the room. Thankfully, it seemed Abraham hadn't noticed anything because he clapped a hand on my shoulder and spun me around. "Now, let's go take a look at the rest of the Packlands. I can show you where your house is and then let you get back to your mom so you can all prepare to move in tomorrow." I smiled at him, but I could feel how brittle it was. "Sounds good." As he led us through the kitchen, I couldn't help but toss a glance over my shoulder at Callista. She was still staring at the table, and if I wasn't mistaken, it looked like she was shaking her head softly too. I didn't know what just happened, or who that woman really was, but I knew I needed to find out.
Callie. Hoo-wee! Did you see the hot new guys? I ignored the annoying voice and continued to read the text in front of me. My organization was about to start working on legislation having to do with fracking, and I needed to be as knowledgeable as possible. "Callie, did you hear me?" I looked up to find Aubrey perched on the table beside me. When had she even gotten there? "What's going on?" Aubrey rolled her eyes. "The new guys. Did you see them? They're delicious looking." I frowned at her choice of words and shook my head. Since when were men described the same way as you would a cake? No, I didn't." Aubrey huffed out an irritated breath. "That's probably because you've got your nose so far inside that book, I'm surprised you don't have ink on the end of it." I self-consciously reached up to rub the tip of my nose. "I'm studying, Aubrey. We have a huge case coming up and I need to—" Yeah, she said, cutting me off. "Anyway, I'm just letting you know I called dibs on both of them." Now it was my turn to roll my eyes. "What are you, 5? You can't call dibs on a person, let alone 2 people." Aubrey shrugged and hopped off the table. "Well, I just did." With that, she sauntered off. I watched her for a moment longer before I shook my head and returned to my textbook. She was ridiculous, and I didn't have time for her nonsense. Truthfully, I should have been up in my room studying, but the walls had felt like they were closing in on me, and I thought a change of scenery was in order. My environmental organization was slowly picking up speed, and I needed to be ahead of my game now more than ever. So far, it was just me and Katie doing what we could when we could, but I had plans to change all that. Within the next year, I wanted to hire another scientist and possibly acquire a lab of our own. That would take money, though, and that wasn't something we had at the moment. In the meantime, I needed to finish this text and fill my already overflowing brain with everything I could learn about fracking and its potential effect on the air, water, and soil before we went out in the field ourselves. I don't know how much time I lost in that textbook before I was tapped on the shoulder. When I looked up, I found my brother Aby with a smile on his face. "Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to introduce...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?